Hello, welcome back to the channel. This is another exercise case on value-added tax. Probably you already got it as, oh my god, boring. However, it's just a good training, I hope, that you remember all the details which we have talked about concerning cross-border deliveries of goods within the EU. Here we have now a case about G. He is a successful medical doctor in Aachen, Germany, and he's very famous among prominent people, so that he has acquired many famous and generous prominent people worldwide as his patients. Now, in his doctor practice in Aachen, G only has tax-free turnover, so no beauty surgery, but only a genuine medical treatment for people who are sick. Now, what happens? In January, G orders new furniture for the waiting room of his practice. He does so from a nice supplier in Belgium. 40,000 euro are paid. That furniture is delivered in February. The invoice only comes in April. And the second event is directly happening here. A former patient of G, a rich person, has moved abroad half a year ago and now lives in Spain. However, he is still fond of G as doctor and does want no other doctor worldwide. So he wants G to do his regular medical checkup, because I do not know any doctor down here and I don't want to take a risk and what patients say. For this reason, G now gets invited by this patient to Spain for 7 days. The patient pays everything, travel costs, holiday stay for 7 days for G and his family in that Spanish village where where the patient, not G, has moved to. That shall be 7,000 in total, plus also a payment for the medical checkup of 1,000. G's accountant or tax advisor now wants to know from you if that revenue can also be treated as tax-free, although it happened in Spain. So that's the question which we have to ask, and yeah, that is what we need to find out. So what happens here? That is what we need to find out, and we do it immediately in a second. So what we have here is G, our doctor, first, and the first thing he did was he bought something from a supplier in Belgium. That was furniture. That furniture went from Belgium to Aachen, so it crossed an EU internal border. That means we have to use and to remember first the rules on intra-community deliveries of goods, or understand it now, not in the technical term. Now we have then to look to the customer first. Is the customer an entrepreneur or a private person? Now, a medical doctor is, you remember that? I hope at least. There's one category in the middle between the regular entrepreneur and the private customer, the private person. People who, with regard to their knowledge and skills in VAT, are regarded by the law as exactly in the middle. So sometimes they are called half entrepreneurs, and they represent a small middle group of people having a medium knowledge between full knowledge like a regular entrepreneur or being a full idiot like a private person. So, and you remember that calling them half idiots was not so nice as half entrepreneurs, and so at least German literature decided to call these people rather half entrepreneurs than half idiots, to mark with a nice word that they are, regarding their knowledge, half the way between a regular entrepreneur and a full idiot, a private person. For these half entrepreneurs, the basic rule was, well, they don't know about VAT now, but they can learn it. And so one says, okay, when they do purchases from other member states in a huge extent, then it can be expected from them that they must learn VAT now and pay the fees for a VAT tax declaration if they need a tax advisor. However, if they only do very small acquisitions during a year, then that would not be tolerable. Then that is inappropriate or not proportional, not proportionate to the requirement. There is not a good proportion between what it costs and what it brings to the state to tax these people exactly as customers. So the rule is rather, if they buy much, they are treated like a regular entrepreneur for acquisition tax purposes. If they buy only a small amount during a year or during last year, then they are treated as if they were private persons still. So it depends on the threshold, and this threshold is laid down in German law in paragraph 1a(3). So in the last paragraphs of the German paragraph on intra-community acquisition. So now here purchases are made with an extent of 40,000 euro. That's rather much for common sense, and it's also much for VAT. It is far sufficient, far more than sufficient than the acquisition threshold. The acquisition threshold in Germany is 12,500. So when we remember that, we can directly conclude Dr. G will be regarded as a regular entrepreneur, not as a private person for acquisition tax purposes. So when we test acquisition tax, it will come out that G has to pay acquisition tax. So the solution for our event must be the following: taxation, taxability. Test 1.1 number 5. Is there an intra-community acquisition in the inland at hand? And the answer is, first check intra-community acquisition. 1a, subparagraph 1, number 1, furniture goes from Belgium to Germany, so changes from one member state into the other, so that's yes, fulfilled. 1a, 1, number 2, the acquirer is an entrepreneur, yes, but here we have to check the additional rule on behalf of entrepreneurs. If he is an entrepreneur, a doctor here, however, if he qualifies then as a so-called half entrepreneur, and he does because he only has tax-free turnover, so that means he does not have to hand in any VAT tax declaration until now. Only this acquisition would cause him to hand in a tax declaration. That is why there is some mercy from the side of the legislator. If you don't buy so much, then we can ignore your VAT obligations and treat you still as a private person. However, if you buy for huge amounts of money, then it's proportionate to demand a tax declaration also from you. Now, number 2 says the acquisition threshold is 12.5. It may be that he didn't exceed that threshold last year, because you remember the threshold, either that is true for the delivery threshold and for the acquisition threshold. If it's surpassed either last year or this year, then you get the status where you have to pay taxes. It may be that he didn't surpass the threshold last year with his purchases from other EU states, but definitively the threshold is exceeded this year, and it's already exceeded when this event here happens, because alone the 40,000 order from Belgium triggers that, or causes that the threshold is exceeded, so it triggers the treatment as regular entrepreneur already. So we can conclude for this acquisition from Belgium, he already has to be treated as regular entrepreneur, so acquisition tax has to be applied, and that's it. So he counts as a regular entrepreneur. And 1A1 number 3 is again, well, basic stuff. The deliverer is an entrepreneur, okay? Somebody who trades or produces furniture is an entrepreneur, and no small entrepreneur. Yes, that's clearly evident from the amount of money which is transferred here, 40,000. That for a single sale, that's a clear indicator that the seller cannot be a small entrepreneur any longer. You remember in Germany, the small entrepreneur threshold is approximately 22,000 at the moment. The moment is now when I speak 2023. And so that seems to be clear. So conclusion, we have to do here with an inter-community acquisition. And the question is now still only where. So where's the place of acquisition? And the answer, which common sense says, 3D sentence 1, in the country where the transport of the good ends. That's in Aachen, that's in Germany. So we have a taxable acquisition by Dr. G in Germany under 1.1 number 5. Is there an exemption? Usually there is not. Intra-community acquisitions are, you remember that, nearly never tax-free. And the most important thing is you must remember that the list of tax exemption is very short and is not paragraph 4 as in usual cases, but in case of an intra-community acquisition, the list is in 4b. There is no feasible applicable exemption in 4b, so it's fully liable to tax. The tax base is the net amount. Gross amount minus VAT included. However, if the customer, he or G, has to pay the VAT himself to the fiscal office, there is no VAT included in the gross amount. So 40,000 are paid, 40,000 is a net amount. Tax rate 19% for furniture because furniture is not listed in 12.2. So we pay 7.6 to the German state. The taxpayer is G, the acquirer, 13A1 number 2. The arousal of the tax is, as usual, 31 number 6. When the invoice is issued, that would be April, but the latest date is the end of the first full calendar month after the month during which the delivery was made. Here, delivery was made in February. First full month later ends with the end of March, so 31st of March at midnight is when the tax becomes existing, so end of March. With regard to an invoice, there is nothing for G to observe because G doesn't write out an invoice. However, either here or under the point peculiarities, one should make a remark that G must necessarily furnish the deliverer with his German VAT identification number. If he does not yet have one, he will have to apply for one just because of this transaction here, because otherwise deliverer B would have to charge Belgian VAT too, because B could not be able to prove that it's an inter-community acquisition in Germany. Declaration duties. G must hand in a tax declaration in Germany, naturally on a regular tax form. That is why the threshold exists, because he will probably have to hand in this tax declaration only because of this single event. That causes additional bureaucracy and additional fees for the tax advisor for the services of the tax advisor. And that was the reason why for very small events or a very small total of purchases from other countries, the half entrepreneurs are not yet taxed but still treated as if they were private persons. No special aspects, and input tax is here not granted because you know that acquisition tax usually can be refunded or credited as input tax. However, G is a medical doctor, so his own output is free of tax under number 14, human health treatment, and that has the logical and compelling consequence that also the relating input tax is not deductible, 15.2 number 1. Yeah, now we can turn to the second event. What happens here? Let's remember it and transform it into a small sketch. G is a doctor from Aachen and he has a patient in Spain. That patient requires medical treatment, a checkup, so that's a service and not a delivery. And that is the important thing which you should have noticed here. And a service requires the place of service. So everything what you have in mind about the internal EU cases for deliveries is directly eliminated now, not from your brain, but from your case here. You don't need it. You have to switch over to completely different set of rules, the rules for services. So no rules on deliveries, services are needed. And with regard to services, there is no special rule like intra-community acquisition of a service or something like that. With services, it's always number one, and then everything is probably governed by the rule concerning the place of service. So what we have to do is just to test taxability regularly under number one. The doctor is an entrepreneur. The doctor acts within his enterprise because medical treatment is even the core activity, the main activity, not an ancillary one, of a doctor. He does it for consideration because he has himself paid. He gets something in return, a holiday for 7 days for himself and his family, and the fees for the checkup. Then let's come to the most interesting things, naturally. The event is a service because no tangible good changes owner. The place of service has now to be determined according to the rules of 3A USDG. I hope at least, remember that there were rules on services, and the place of service was relatively arbitrarily determined by rules on the place of service in 3A. The general rules were 3A1 and 3A2, and 3A1 was to be applied if the customer is a private person, 3A2 to be applied if the customer is a business person. So as we here have a private customer, medical treatment, that's not something which you buy as a business customer. And indeed, it's just that a prominent person wants a checkup, so no business reasons. The general rule is then that the place of service is where the entrepreneur, that's in our case the doctor, has established his practice, and that practice is in Aachen. So it does not play any role where the treatment is really effectuated, where he travels to in order to give a treatment. Let us, before we end up with Aachen as place of service, still check if a special rule in 3A3 can change this. If you take your printout or your slides from the tax acts, you will find out no, there is no special rule for medical treatment. And 3A4 to 8 usually apply if a third country is involved, or in case of internet transactions with private persons or similar things. And no, you will find no rule which applies here. So the general rule stays in force. The place of service is Aachen. So that's in the German inland. So the event is taxable in Germany, although all the persons involved believe that they are acting in Spain for VAT. Nevertheless, this transaction is subjected to German law. So the question if the tax exemption for medical treatment under German law can still be applied, although the treatment or the checkup happened in Spain, can be answered with a small, simple, and brutal yes, because the place of treatment played no role at all here. So we have still the German exemption because taxable in Germany means the German law applies. And the tax base is on the net amount, and in tax free cases, everything which is paid is automatically net. The tax rate, there is none, and blah, the rest is as usual. So that's it, the case for today. I hope you could follow a bit the reasoning. It would be nice if you followed my recommendation to try to solve the case first and then check the solution. However, if not, it's also a good alternative to say, okay, now I got a rough approach or rough overview about how the case runs. I just take the case again, take a sheet of paper, try to solve it, and try to reconstruct all the right things for the solution from my memory. However you do it, do it. And then the only thing which remains for me for today is just to say goodbye, and I hope to see you soon back on this channel. Till the next time, goodbye.